we're going to give permission, you'll see a little pop-up. And so if anybody is opposed to being recorded or being a part of this, please let us know. Are you good, Julie?
Yep, all done.
Okay. So this is session 1 of a 6-part series. And so the idea here is for people that want to kind of delve into Writer's Workshop, who are not familiar with it. We are hoping that you'll join us for all 6 sessions. If it's something that you are using or that you want to just kind of hone your skills on in a specific area, each session is considered separate. So you'll have to register for all of them, but we're hoping that everybody will be with us for most of it. This presentation will be shared as well as the video recordings and some links. So you'll get an email either later today or tomorrow, just depending on how long the Zoom links take. If you have any questions, we do want to make this interactive. So please use the chat box and we will answer questions as a group if it's a kind of a big overarching question. Otherwise, we will also be able to kind of address those questions in our follow-up email with everybody. Okay.
Just wait, Lauren. One thing that I also wanted to mention is that this series, because I just saw Magdalena, I'm not sure if I said your name correctly, and I think you said you were at Muriel Clayton. This series now is intended for grade 1 to 4, but we're offering the same session for 5 to 8 on different dates. You just have to look at the RVS PL calendar for those dates. But you're more than welcome to stay with us. Most of the session is quite similar. We just targeted more the lower grade on this one. We will use the registration email list to forward you the recording. So if you did not register to this session, please write me your name in the chat box. So I'm going to add it to our registration. But the key here would be to make sure to register if you want to do the recording. The other thing I wanted to mention is Lauren is going to share we're going to show some resources. We totally understand that most of you are at home, not at school, so you may not have the resources with you. That's totally fine. Our intent is just to give you a quick introduction of what it is. As well, if you feel comfortable, which is funny because we just had this discussion with Sherry a few minutes ago, if you feel comfortable, please turn on your camera. But we're not putting any pressure. The reason we're saying this is for us, this is a good way to read our audience. I might do jokes, but if I don't see your face, I'm not sure if my jokes are funny or not. So it's just a good feedback for us, but don't feel obliged at all. And I think that's it. We're ready to roll.
Okay. So talking just about what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about the why Writer's Workshop. Why are we talking about the units of study specifically? We're going to talk about the resources, as Julie said. We're going to show you what's in the box. The chances of you having the box with you is pretty low, but just so you can get an idea of what's in there, as well as some online resources that are available as well. We're going to talk about bends and intentional planning. The bends we will address later what they mean. It's just the sections of each genre within the units, and then how that intentional planning can help you kind of get through the most important parts of each unit. We're also going to be talking about environments and structures that will help support making Writer's Workshop successful in your classroom. I think somebody has...
Yeah, we're going to let everyone turn off your mic.
Yeah, please mute your mic. You can unmute it if there's something you'd want to say, or just please put it into the chat. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to do a poll. So Julie is going to put a little poll up because we want to know just roughly where are you at with Writer's Workshop. So we'll give you a couple minutes just to fill out those questions. Also excited, right? We always want to work on our abs, but we also have to work on our core all the way around.
Yeah, that's good. So we see there's a lot of people that okay, I'll share the give you 10 more seconds. Okay, so here we go.
Okay, so it looks like a lot of you have used it before. Some of you kind of have maybe heard of it. You've used some sort of workshop model, but it looks like a lot of you have tried some lessons and are looking for support, which is awesome. So we're definitely going to give you lots of ideas throughout the entire series of ways that you can kind of make it work a little bit better in your environment. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So now what we're going to do is Julie is going to walk you through using something called a Jamboard. Well, we'll do it with you together. So what we want to know, just kind of starting off, is what do you know about Writers Workshop and what are some things that you're wondering? So I'm going to pull you into the Jamboard, and then once we're in there, Julie can kind of give you a little bit more of an idea once we do the instructions of how it can work in your online teaching platform right now.
So I've just shared the link to the Jamboard in the chat box, so you can click on it.
So once you're in there, what you're going to do is you're going to see on the left-hand side that there are some tools. So right under the middle large mouse cursor, you'll see like a little box. You're going to click on that, and then you are going to write either something that you know or something that you're wondering. So here's an example of mine. I'm going to put it in here. Okay, so you can write some things that you know, some things that you're wondering. So we'll give you a few minutes to kind of contribute to the board. We can see that there's quite a few people in here. So grab a Post-it note, anything you know. If you're not really sure about anything, maybe some things that you're wondering, like what is it? What is the structure? What does it look like? How can I?
I was just going to talk about Jamboard. Jamboard is part of the Google Suite. So when you go to your waffle, it's one of the options when you scroll down past Google Drive. Usually it's on the second page. It's a new tool, and it has been fantastic. I've worked with some teachers using it. It's a good way to collaborate. Since many of you got Google Classroom, having that Jamboard is a good platform where many students, as you can see, can collaborate and see each other's reply. Another way we've used it with some teachers was that some teachers are doing reading with students using RAS Kids, but they also wanted to use other books than RAS Kids. They wanted to, for example, the LLI books or any other books. What we love about Jamboard, now you need to be careful with copyrights. I would not recommend putting the whole book in it, but you can see that you can insert an image. So the teacher had put only one image of one page of the book there on that Jamboard. And as you can see, there's different annotation tools that you can use. There's a pointer, there's a pen. So as the teacher was doing the reading with the student, she kept track of the reading, like asking students focus on the ending of the words or chunking or whatever. And then the teacher was able to write some post-it notes of strategy that the student should use. The beauty is, so as I said, you can use it for a big group of people or just one-on-one with students, because then that student had also access to that after the reading note. So there's different ways of doing it. And we thought that was a neat tool to add to your practice. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of comments. Lauren, do we want to read a few?
Yeah, so some of the comments that we're seeing, it helps students with writing, absolutely. How effective it can be incredibly effective. Especially there's some things I can see here talking about that vertical growth among grades. So it creates some common language, some understandings, terminology, as well as styles of writing. Students have much pride in their writing, absolutely, and we'll talk about kind of celebrations a little bit today. The structure, mini lessons, some independent writing time, finished with some sharing, yes. Talking about the questions as well. So what we're going to do after is we're not going to go through all of these questions right now. What we're going to do is we're going to look at what questions will be addressed in our 6-session series. And if there's ones in there that won't be addressed specifically, so for example, how might I make this work in a grade 1 FI class? What we will do is we will reach out within our follow-up emails answering some of these questions as well as some of the questions that come up in the chat.
And if you have specific questions, because with the Jamboard now on the sticky, we don't see, let me check if I can get the email address of the people in case we want to.
Yeah, some of them are anonymous.
Some of them I don't. So if you've got a specific question that at the end of the session is not answered, please write it in the chat box or email us personally. I'm going to write our email in the chat box for you to contact us. Okay, Lauren, let's move on.
Okay.
Whoops.
Okay, so when we talk about the why of Writers Workshop, so as you know, we want a balanced literacy approach. And if you look at what we have in terms of balanced literacy, we have interactive read alouds, write alouds, shared reading and writing, guided reading and writing, independent reading and writing, and word work. Within the guided reading and writing is where you're going to start to see Writers Workshop. So when you look at the optimal learning model, and what we mean by that is the I do, we do, you do. Not only is Writers Workshop going to really support that guided writing moving into independent writing, but each lesson, each mini lesson, so every single day that you go through Writers Workshop is going to have that gradual release of responsibility. So it's going to start with the I do, and then within the mini lesson, there's always going to be that we do section with that partner work. And then we always kind of want the we do, we do, we do. So we want a lot of support and scaffolding for students, especially in the younger grades where all of you are working. And then the you do piece. So sending the students off and doing some more independent pieces. The we do, again, is going to be a lot of conferring, things like that, which we're going to talk more about in the subsequent sessions.
But something I want to mention about the we do, if I'm reflecting back on my experience, me as a writer, I despise writing, hate writing, always did, even in French and in English. But also if I'm reflecting back as me as a teacher, not liking to write, obviously that was not my favorite topic to teach. So often my go-to was, I would model on the board and then ask kids, okay, now you go on, you do your writing. And often my first goal, once I would get the easiest thing for me to give them that feedback, was to mark, look at the grammar, the convention. Like I was killing, if I'm thinking back on what my kids were receiving as a feedback, it was often add details, look at your convention. It was not a way to move them. I was killing their love for writing. I was not encouraging them to take risk in writing. So that's something that we do is super important, making sure that to help them becoming the writer who takes risk, who start loving to write, we want to make sure that we do that once we provide effective feedback. So for me as a teacher, I just did not know how to. So often I relied on this, but this is why we love that resource of Lucy Calkins, because it specifically walks you through. But also what we love is that shared experience where the teacher gets to write that mini lesson. You're going to use mentor text so you can see how writers have been able to do some teaching point, how like some craft move. So me, if I'm thinking as a writer, learning to write in English, I love working with Lauren and Jody, my colleagues. When we try to draft an email together, I hear their thought processing. I hear them thinking out loud. So that's that same experience that we need to provide to our students, that we do, that we make the writing process visual, accessible, so that you share your thinking with your students. I'm done.
So now, what do writers need? So the first thing that we're going to talk about just a little bit is time. And so when we talk about time, students, no matter if they're in grade 1, grade 4, grade 12, they need time to write every day. And when I know that one of the questions was about just making sure during that writing time that students are on task, volume is going to matter, fluency in writing is going to matter, but that's something that needs to be built. And so when you're starting out with Writers Workshop, are the students going to sit and write for half an hour? No. It's not going to happen. And so they need that time though, that consistent time and that dedicated writing time to increase their stamina, to understand how to write with like longer, how to write long is one of the expressions that they use in Writers Workshop, and write with some more volume, but making sure that when they are writing for volume, that it's not, that it's focused and it's an intentional piece of writing. Talking about choice, you're going to get a higher level of writing when students have choice and then they have an opportunity to write something that they're passionate about. And so one of the reasons that we always recommend in the first unit is narrative writing is because the students have choice in what they're writing about. They're writing about themselves, which students love to do, but it's also an experience that they can share with you. And also encouraging students when it comes to something like informational writing, things that they want to write about and they're passionate about. And also when you look at younger grades, something that they're really knowledgeable about, because when you think of a grade 1 student, you know, if you're going to do some informative type of writing, you don't want to be having them kind of look for their own information and resources. It's not really realistic. So we're going to show you a little video about a boy named Henry and how this moved him forward in terms of being a passionate writer about things that that he finds important in his life.
Our planet is going to be wrecked. People are just being rude to it. They throw trash on the ground. They cut down trees. They make forests into places, into roads. They need to think about what they are doing, and what they are doing to the planet, what they are doing to animals. They are being so bad. I could just call them dumb people. Or maybe even a bad word, the S word. I'm gonna try to fight them off when I'm a grown up. I hate them.
Well, maybe you could make posters. Would that be a good idea? And then you wouldn't have to fight anybody? Yeah.
We'll do that and fight. I'm just gonna yell at them. Actually, no, I'm not gonna yell at them. I haven't done.
So you get the idea.
We want our students, like when we refer back to choice, like that little boy, you know, like Henry is going, like he was giving his choice. He's going to write a lot now because he was writing about something that he's passionate about. He's got a voice, he's got an audience. He's going to say the S word, not sure what the S word is, but anyway, he's quite mad. If I'm thinking back on me as a teacher, when I was teaching writing, my choice was often on Monday was the writing journal. Write to me what you did over the weekend. Yeah, that worked fine for week 1. But after doing this in November, my kids had nothing else to talk about, right? Yes, in my mind, oh, I'm giving them choice. They can talk to me about everything they did in the weekend, but I was not allowing them to express their passion. We need to make sure that we're leaving it open.
Another thing that we need to really talk about is explicit instruction. So we talked a little bit about that gradual release of responsibility, but we want to explicitly name the teaching points. And so that's one of the things that I really love about Writers Workshop is, today writers, this is what I'm going to teach you. And it makes them very specific. When we write a piece of narrative writing, we want to blank. And so I think that it's really important because you can show students what a good piece of writing is. You can walk them through it, but you don't want to kind of tiptoe around, or you don't want to have them make any sort of guess on what they're doing. And so the one thing that this does is it gives you the students explicit instruction on what the teaching point is, and then their job for the day in their writing is to use that teaching point in their own piece of writing. In terms of response, it's looking at who are they writing for. So a perfect example is this Henry kid. He has his own page now, and he actually wrote to the federal government. So he's in the States, however, but he wrote talking about how he feels like there's a lot of injustice happening. And so for him, being able to write to somebody with importance that might actually have a say in making change happen, really boosted his level of writing. And he became, because he's super passionate about the topic, but he also has a real audience that he's writing to. Because a perfect example, when we're talking about like giving students choice, I did journal writing for years in my classroom. And oh, well, you know, they're allowed to choose whatever they want. How would they not want to write about their weekend? Well, first of all, many students don't want to write about their weekend, but also they knew that it was just me reading it. Right. And so after a while, after I give their little positive comments on the side columns of their journal, you see that motivation drop really quickly because they don't have an authentic audience. If they were to write a piece to their peers about like the greatest moment in their life, perhaps that level of writing would be different. And then feedback. You want there to be definitely a feedback cycle with your students on how it's going with their writing, things that they're working on. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in our piece with conferring, because you want them to have some clearly identified goals and some things to be working on.
And I think that the best example that I have for that, and it goes to that explicit instruction and feedback, is, as Lauren said, it has to be specific. I've shared this example often for reading, but I think it also applies for writing. Let's say I'm driving on Deerfoot and my cars break down. The first thing that I'm going to do is going to take my cell phone, call my husband. Guy, my God, my car broke down on Deerfoot. Help me, I don't know what to do. Guy will say, okay, get off the car, lift the hood and look under. And I will say, yes, Guy, I'm looking. What should I do? And Guy will say, look harder. And I'll say, yes, Guy, I'm looking very hard. And he'll say, come on, look harder, look again, add more details, right? Or even if he keeps giving me those feedback, I still won't be able to fix my car until he tells me, okay, look in the upper left corner, try to connect this wire. Until he gives me very specific feedback, that's what's going to move me. So that's kind of what we have to think with our students, is giving them specific feedback that can move them, that when they write about whatever they choose to write, they can practice that.
Yeah, absolutely. Or like my signature line when thinking back in my practice, well, add more detail, right? Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to talk about what's in the box. And again, you know, the chance of you having a box is very slim, but if Writer's Workshop is something that you have not dipped your toes into whatsoever, you've probably seen these boxes in your learning commons, curious maybe about what they are. So we're going to go through. Yeah.
I'm just going to suggest people. So you see, Lauren is going to show you physically the material. Now her window might be small because she's sharing a screen. So if you want to have a close-up of the books that she's showing, I'm suggesting you to double click on her name, and then that will become the big window on your computer.
Okay, so especially with the primary kits, you're going to see that there's quite a bit of things in here. So the first thing that I'm going to pull out is going to be, is your guide. So here's your guide to running the Writer's Workshop. You will notice that it'll say Common Core. Yes, this is an American resource. We obviously don't follow Common Core. And when we go through a little bit more in depth about the resources, we will talk more about, there's like actual specific pieces about Common Core. So obviously these are things that we're going to ignore. But just some really good things about the how-to and how to run Writer's Workshop. You are also going to have a large book. So the guide is how to run it. You're going to have a large book, which is called the Pathways. And so the Pathways is your Bible towards assessment, and talking about learning progressions, things like that. We will talk about this book a lot more in depth in our assessment section or session, which I believe is session 5. So this is your kind of your assessment piece. Then you're going to have a bunch of coiled books. Generally, there will be 3. In this specific example that I have, there's 4, just because there's an extra unit. So we will talk about these in the next slide, but these coiled pieces are your lessons, and each book is your unit. So when we talk about units of study, each of these is a unit based off of a specific genre. The grade 2 kit, if any of you are grade 2 teachers, you will see generally there's going to be 3, sometimes 4. So the 4th one is, in this case, poetry. You're also going to see a little book here called If Then. The If Then curriculum. And so this is for your conferring, and this is also an amazing resource that if the student is doing this, then this is what you're going to do. So we find the feedback that we really get is, this is an amazing resource because this is the stuff that I really don't feel comfortable with. If the student is writing about a huge subject, even though we've had a lesson on it, then what? Then what do we do? And so that's a really, really good piece. And one last thing that you will see in the boxes are your mentor texts. And so some boxes might not have them in there, but you should all have them. And if not, it's something that you're going to want to track down for sure. So within the lessons, you will see that they will require a request mentor text. So when I do a demo lesson with you tomorrow, you will see that there's going to be a mentor text that I'm using. So again, you'll have your coiled units, you'll have your guide. So I'll just use my little tool here. So like I said, you're going to have your guide, which is your information on how to run it. You're going to have your units, which are the coiled books. So these are the genres of writing that you're teaching. You're going to have your If Then curriculum book, which is talking about conferring and just supporting your writers, giving them that feedback piece what we just talked about. And then your pathways book, which is your assessment piece. Okay, so now when we look, when we look at the actual coiled books, so our units, our genres, we have 3 that you will see across the grades. And so when the first unit is always narrative. So we'll just go through this chart here just for simplicity's sake. So you have your information genre. So the purpose of this genre is to explain or to teach something. The structure is topics and subtopics. So talking about like how you would actually formally lay that out. The next unit is narrative. The purpose is to tell a story. The structure that you're teaching in this sense is beginning, middle, and end. Finally, we have opinion and argument. The purpose is to present something with a point of view, trying to convince your audience. And then the structure is claim and support. You will see like topics and subtopics, claiming and support. Then within these structures is when you're going to get some of the lessons that you might be familiar with, something like boxes and bullets, for example. Okay. So when we go into a unit, so again, that's talking about the COIL book. We're going to be, the first thing that you're going to see inside the book, and this is a really, really kind of good overview. So the picture is what I'm going to show to you if you can see me at all. So this is your overview of what that entire COIL book will cover. So there's a couple of things that we'll talk about in this sense. I'm just going to move my chat window down. Okay, so you're going to have bends. So if you take a look, sorry, I'm just trying to get my pointer here. Okay, if you have, can you see my pointer? No.
Yep.
You can? Oh, weird, because I can't see it. Okay, so you'll see here there's bend 1, bend 2, and bend 3. And so if you think about the bends, so the overall unit is divided into bends. Sometimes there is a 4th bend. We'll just talk about these bends for right now. So bend 1 is your big nuggets. Your activating bend, so getting started with the writing, some things that you want to consider. So in this case, it's talking about discovering small moments that matter, capturing story ideas. In the grade 1 kit, for example, it's even talking about how to get started with writing. Things like touch and tell, sketch and sketch then write. So even strategies to kind of activate the writing process period. Once you get into Ben 2, it's going to be more of that process piece and that drafting piece. So you've learned some really good nuggets here. Something like a small moment is what we're going to talk about tomorrow. And then in here is when you're doing that writing, but now you're actually adding a couple things into there while you're drafting. So let's revise with intent, some more close reading, some things that we can do learning from somebody else. And then the Ben 3 is your second practice of all of the things that you've already learned. Now, there's already been a question about time, which we will talk a little bit about. Here's the biggest thing that I've ever learned with this, though, being a super type A person, you need to move on. Don't expect mastery. Just keep going. That's really, really important. You don't want to stick on a topic or a mini lesson or a lesson here for more than one, maybe two sessions. Two sessions would be based off of time. So it's not something that you want to keep with. These lessons are exactly as they are. They're mini lessons. So you don't want to stay too long on them. You want to keep going. Don't expect mastery. Just move on.
I think something that I want to add about this, Lauren, one thing that I love about this resource is that it really changed my way of teaching writing. I was one of the teachers who we would start writing a personal story. So my kids would start writing the story. We would keep writing, drafting, reviewing it, and publishing it. This whole process working on the same story would often take 1 month. One example that I can give you is my son last year. Doesn't come to rock you, but I remember in June, he was super happy to show me the story that they finally finished. He said, "Mama, we've been working for it for months and months and months." When I read the story, it was a Christmas story. My poor child has been working since Christmas all the way to June on the same story. Talk about killing the love for writing. That's one example, right? Mm-hmm. And what was the saddest part for me is, as a parent, when I looked at because he said, like, "Mama, we have to review and correct every single mistake." And when I looked at the final product, that wasn't my child's voice at all. That was a teacher all over, right? Because being a type A, she didn't want to send a product with some mistakes, but the end product was not my son's writing at all. So what I love about this is, as you see in each lesson, they're teaching you a different teaching point. So if today we're learning about a small moment, so we say, okay, like the teacher will do that mini lesson and the teacher say, okay, off you go. So now for 40 minutes, the students have time to go and practice that teaching point. So today that kid may decide to do a small moment using Beyblade. I'm thinking on my boys now, they love Beyblade. So that story might be about Beyblade. Now tomorrow, when my teacher Lauren is teaching me so she's going to lesson 2, teaching me another teaching point, as a child, I get the choice. I can either go back to my Beyblade story and add that to that story, or start fresh. Today, I may start talking about the rain outside. So you're keeping that big motivation that it's not the same story that the kids are working on, right? Because we're working on the skills. Now, at the end though, as you see in the Ben 3, that's when we're asking students to go back to all the stories that they have started. And then we say, okay, now you choose one. Choose the one that you're the most proud of. And now that's going to be your final product.
So just a couple more things, and then I think Julie, we did skip it earlier, we'll have a little chat. So as Julie said, so we talked about the bends. These are each of the mini lessons. And that's, I think the big thing is that you're not killing the love of writing by having them stick with the same topic or piece of writing. Another person in the chat had asked about just timing. These lessons, and we'll talk about it in the next slide, are meant to take up technically like 45 to 60 minutes, give or take, depending on your grade and your student's level of stamina currently. But one thing that we have seen teachers do, will do the mini lesson and start writing. And then the next day, they're gonna come back to that same topic, and then they're going to use the mid-workshop teach point. And so we are going to talk about each of the components that you see across the top, the mini lessons, the conferring, the mid-workshop teach, and the share in our later sessions. But something that you can keep in mind is if you can't do a mini lesson every single day, just strictly based off of time because the students don't have an opportunity to write for very long after, then it's something that you can manipulate a little bit to get through using the mid-workshop teach.
Another big thing about this units of study is that as a teacher, do not worry if you don't have time to do lesson 5, 6, 7, or 10, 11, 12. Your kids are not going to miss out, because the way this resource is being built is that one year to another, so grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, it's always the same teaching point, just being taught within more complexity every year. So even if in grade 1 you didn't have time to do the lesson 2, don't worry about this, because next year, if the teacher is covering it, that student is still going to review that same teaching point. So your kids are not going to miss out. Like, it's meant to be built from what was done previously. So
Yes, and exactly. So you'll see in the lesson that I'm doing tomorrow, it's introducing what a small moment is. This one talks about the small moment again. In the grade 4, there will be small moment writing. So again, the vertical growth and the language and vocabulary that can be used across the grades is also something that's super, super powerful.
Lauren, can we just pause? I don't see many questions. Do we have any question at this moment in the chat box? Is there any comments? If everything is good, maybe go to your reaction and give us the thumbs up, just to know that we're on the right track, because we don't have much feedback now. But if you have any question, please, maybe
or even just typing in the chat box, what are some things that are resonating with you? Or what are some things that you recognize as, you know what, that's probably something that I could do more of, or things that I hadn't really thought about. So anything in terms of what we had talked about for what writers need, things like time, feedback, audiences, and then also just kind of the overview of what the units of study look like. We'll just give a minute or so for anybody to put their 2 cents in.
Yes, when they choose, K. Lord was asking, when students choose their best writing piece to celebrate at the end of a band, do we encourage students to do edit and publish this piece of writing? Yes. So that's that piece that they're really going to work on for the band 3. That's more than editing. Yes, the mid-workshop lesson, it's really interesting. What I love about it, usually the mid-workshop lesson, it's meant that if I'm a teacher, I start teaching, my kids are writing for 40 minutes. Now, when the students are still working on their stamina, if I'm a grade 1 teacher, my kids might not be engaged for 40 minutes to keep writing. So as a teacher, when I start seeing that there's some movement in the class, that's when I may say, okay, stop guys, come back to the carpet. And that's when you're doing that mid-workshop teaching. That's when you're reviewing with them that teaching point. So some teachers have used that teaching point, as I said, as Lauren said, maybe not on that day 1, but if they're splitting one lesson over 2 days, they're using that mid-workshop teaching point to go back on day 2, just to rehook the students into that lesson.
I found like going through the mid-workshop teach is when, as a teacher in the classroom, I would hit my point of being like, I have just given like 3 students the same piece of feedback or like advice or redirecting them. And I find that mid-workshop teach is like, everybody stop, like, let's revisit, let's talk about, because how many times have you told 7 students the exact same thing, right? And so that's how I see that mid-workshop teach. Everybody just take a break. Let's talk about this for a minute. here's our kind of like our midway point where we're just going to reiterate what we're learning about.
And one comment that I want to clarify with everyone, yes, that page you're seeing is in front, like when you open the code, that's in the back, that front page, that's where you can find that page.
Now, one thing that did come up, and I will address now because I don't want to forget it, what you will see is that some of the level of writing, especially when you look at the exemplars, which we'll get to later, the level of writing expected is very high. And so the idea with the units of study and Calkin's work is that it starts in kindergarten. The kindergarten curriculum in America, even though curriculum within the States is different, is high. The expectations are very high. And the thought of it is that there's a full day kindergarten. So not only are our students in Alberta in kindergarten half the time, but there's also there's a different focus, right? So the amount of rigor expected of writers in kindergarten in the States is quite high. So one of the things that did come up at the beginning was, can we drop down? Yes, absolutely. And it's common, especially for say grade 1, to drop down to kindergarten because, like, for example, Julie and I were doing a presentation this past school year, and the grade 1 group had the grade 1 kit, and they're like, no. And if you look at like the end of the year writing in kindergarten with these units, you'd be like, I would be happy if my grade 1s could write like this. So definitely, yes, look at the lower kits if it's something that's available, and especially if you have not started Writer's Workshop at all. However, I will say that, as Julie said, the topics are strung through without. So if you're like, because you'll see a lesson I'm going to do tomorrow, oh, I really love that lesson, I want to do that, I think I could do that in grade 3. There's going to be something with a very similar theme in your grade 3 box. But yeah, definitely don't.
And something as well, at the end of the session, we will stay online in case you want to register your resource online. Now, we checked with Heinemann, and copyrights, it's okay if you're a grade 1 teacher and you've got the grade 1 kit. If your school has the kindergarten kit, you are allowed to go and register online that kindergarten kit. What it will give you access as a teacher is you won't have the lessons, but you will have the posters with the anchor chart and the teaching point. So as a grade 1 teacher, you will be able to see what were the teaching point in kindergarten. So that's kind of a way to bring it back. Something else that I want to talk about, the lesson that we didn't talk, Lauren, that's super important. The resource is so much writing, so much pages. And to be honest, that's one of the main turnoff. People often will try, and it's like too much planning, can't do it. We're not doing it today, but tomorrow I think Lauren is going to show you a quick way to look through that reading to adapt it. And me, I'm going to share personally, I don't like kits, I don't like program, I don't like when it's all done for me. When I first started teaching with those resources, I changed the stories. Like you will see in the mini lesson, it's very, not scripted. It can be scripted. If your teacher has never done it, it's all written there for you. However, some of the stories doesn't make sense. Like in grade 3, they're talking about cockroaches, and that's your way to connect with your students. Well, most of our kids don't know what cockroaches are. So for me, I've always used my personal story. So make sure, like, these are guidelines. You don't have to stick to every single wording. Make it your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was a question about combined grade classes. Yes, because if you're grade, you will read the grade 3 kit and it'll absolutely fall in line. There was another question again about mimicking an author. We're going to talk a lot about mentor text in session 3, but absolutely students are definitely, you want them to mimic pieces of writing. So what we're going to do is we're just going to look really quickly at what the cycle of the workshop looks like. So if you're brand new to workshop and you're like, what is workshop all about? So the first thing that you're going to have is your mini lesson. So your mini lesson needs to be 10 minutes or less. Anytime after that, especially with young students, you're going to lose them, right? Beginning with connection, teaching point, active engagement, and link probably means nothing to you if you're not familiar with it. We're going to talk about all of that tomorrow. What is the mini lesson? What are the components of the mini lesson? Workshop's going to start off 10 minutes mini lesson. Then what you're going to do is you're going to get your students to write. So 2/3 of your entire workshop time, students are writing. Students write for up to 40 minutes. Yes, that would be amazing. In the early grades, that's not something that's going to happen out of the gates, and that's not something that might be happening at all, especially depending on what your blocks are. If your blocks are only 40 minutes, then they're going to be writing for 30. So again, you're going to manipulate that based off of your block time. If your blocks are shorter, you need to really, really, really make sure that your mini lessons are short. I would say that's one of the things starting out is teachers love to talk. And so keeping your mini lessons short is important. When your students are writing, this is when you're going to confer with them. This is when you're going to give them their feedback. This is when you're going to do your mid-workshop teach or taking small groups based off of need. Then you're going to have partner work. We will talk some more about partnerships, but it's really a targeted conversation that they're going to be given. And then there's going to be a lot of routine and structure put into place so that they know what partnered work looks like. And then the teaching, the share piece. So the teacher's going to show and highlight perhaps some pieces of writing, getting students highlighting some things that haven't gone really well or effectively. And then again, you're looking at, and through that, you're going to give student examples. So I'm just going to tell you about a little piece that Julie wrote today about her small moment. Here's what she did really, really well. And then reinforcing that teaching and that mini lesson. Now, we want to talk a little bit about structures that are going to support workshop. The first thing is during your mini lesson, you're going to have a gathering space. So all the students are going to come together every single time, no matter what grade. We did the grade 5 to 8. Grade 8s are going to come together. They're not going to come sit on the carpet, but it's really important that everybody's together. You have their attention, they're close in proximity, and then they're sitting near their partner that they're going to talk with. An easel or something to write with, because you want to be doing some, perhaps some pictures, talking about anchor charts, things like that. So you want a place that you can put all those things. A document camera. And the reason for a document camera is you're going to write live in front of your students. And so you want them to see what you're doing and as you're writing and going through it. It's really, really important that you write for and with your students.
But that you also share your thought as you're writing, whether it be the spelling, I can't remember how to spell this, I'm going to sound it out. Either that or just the idea, how can I make this scene in my story more like for my reader to see it like a movie, for example, right? Like you want that thought process going across to your students.
Mm-hmm. Building the routine is really important. So having their writing tubs, they go to their table, they grab their tubs, they have their writing books or their folders in there. So creating that routine, not only of the structure of the workshop, so mini lesson, writing, partner work, share, but also just like it's time for writing, they know exactly what to do and where to go. Anchor charts and word walls. We're going to talk a little bit about anchor charts next, and then a lot more in depth in a couple sessions from now. But the anchor charts are what hold the teaching point and what hold the mini lesson. So you really want those anchor charts to be a part of your workshop and your walls, but that are used and that just don't sit there. A common space for published work. We'll show you a couple of pictures about that for talking about celebrating, and that students can proudly show what they've been doing. A notebook or paper choice. Again, we are going to talk about this in a later session, but these are things that are really important to support workshop. So paper choice in grade 1, it becomes really important, especially if you have students who are really reluctant to write. As well as the choice in writing device. You want to make sure that, well, first of all, that the writing device is something that works for the student, whether it's a large grip, a gripper on the pencil, and then later on changing what specifically they're writing with. Desks and groups for small group instruction, and that is going to be with their partners. So you're going to intentionally group your students together.
Now, obviously, Lauren, everything that you've seen with the environment, obviously now if I'm putting in your shoes, you're thinking, okay, that sounds good if we're going back to the classroom in September, but with social distance, like I know there's many scenarios running in your head. We are here to help you brainstorm. It's hard to know now. However, luckily, I have many friends in Quebec who have been back to teaching about a month ago, and many of them are using the writers workshop in French. So they've come up with different kinds of solution on how to gather and how to do all of that. So we were not going to cover it now on how to do this in a virtual environment, but that's something that we can definitely brainstorm when the times happen, or even now, like if until June, if you've coming up with a few questions, please email us and we can brainstorm with you.
You're gonna do the word walls, Julie?
Yes, word wall. What we want to mention really about word walls is that I know, again, type A teacher, sometimes in August we go and we prep our classroom and the word wall is all there, beautiful. That word wall should be living. It should be something that's being built organically with your students. And it should be words that they are going to use a lot. So it's, yeah, should not be prepped before students are coming, but more so with the students.
Talking about anchor charts. So talking about anchor charts today, we really want the routines and the expectations to be set, and then the students are gradually going to become more independent. And so ideally you could just point to the anchor chart and not even need to say anything to them. So the anchor chart is their anchor, essentially. It's what they're going to look at, they're going to refer to. So in this case, we have what writing partners do for this example. So an anchor chart in this sense is more about kind of supporting that structural piece. We will talk
token, no, on the.
We will talk a little bit more about anchor charts that are supporting the teaching point, because again, you're going to do this mini lesson and then you're going to send students off, and you know some younger students are going to be like, what are we doing again? So that anchor chart it holds their thinking for them.
Now the anchor chart could become a decoration in the classroom, kind of like the word wall, if it's not something that's being referred a lot. So there's different way to do it. You can have it posted on the classroom, but often what we've seen teachers is printing that page, and that comes in the kit, printing that page and putting one sheet in a plastic holder at each center where you've got 4 kids sitting together. So that anchor chart is right there. The other option too is to print it off, print 1 copy and put it in the child's folder, and you can highlight actually which one specifically that kid should be writing, like which teaching point for that piece of writing. So it's that reminder of what they're supposed to work on.
And then adding on to the anchor chart is when you want to do the expectation chart. And so I think that teachers who start with writers workshop and then they need some more support, a lot of the times it's building the expectations and the routine, as well as kind of understanding how they can make the lessons their own. So routines are so important. And again, make everything visible to your students. We have a mini lesson and then it's writing time and a share. Here are the expectations during the mini lesson. You're going to come together, you're going to sit with your partner. During writing time, what is your job? What are you meant to be doing right now? And they're sitting with their intentional partners who can support them. Because the one thing that we want to stay away from in writers workshop is to just butterfly around the room during writing time. That's not the point of the writing time. The writing time is very intentional for you to work with students, either in small groups, independently, strategy groupings, whatever it is. And so that the students need to understand what their role is during that time as well. And these expectations need to be created and understood as an entire class. And then, so one of the things they say in Writers Workshop, we're never done writing. When you're done, you've only just begun. So also helping students, giving them strategies for when they are done, what are things that they can do? Well, they can start a new piece of writing. They can reread their writing. They can, there's multiple things that they can do. Now, is this going to be seamless out of the gates? Absolutely not. We talked about that stamina piece. So it's something that has to be built, but keeping these routines and expectations in place is what's going to make you successful at Writers Workshop if you stick with it. Finally, a common space for published work. So when we go back, if we were to go back and look at the bends, the last thing in bend 3 that you will see is the celebration. Like we said, we are not striving towards mastery. We want to teach some really important components of a genre. So even if you don't intend on going to Bend 3 because it's your second practice, one thing that you always want to do is schedule your celebration, and you want to celebrate the work. And so I think what's really important here is not only allowing students to see their own growth, but allowing other people to see the growth within them. And so a couple examples that we see here are about the author, so people can learn about the author, and here's their final piece of writing. Here's where I started, here is where I am now, and they can have their piece of writing here. And then a place that they can, so these are things that you'll see on bulletin boards, and sometimes they're outside in the hallway because you want other people aside from your classmates to see these things. So here's the author, here's some things that they wrote. Again, here are some ways that I've grown. Again, with the celebration, what is really important that we want to point out here is that it's not a polished piece of work, like Julie said, that's lifted by the teacher and lifted by all of these things. This is a piece of writing that is messy, because it's the process that's really important in Writer's Workshop. It's not about the finished product.
And something that I love, yes, we did a session with Penny Kittle, and I thought that was brilliant what she said. We're teaching the process. We're not teaching the product. And I think that's really important. That's what I love about that picture with the 2 post-it, is that as a child, you're showing the progress that you have made since you started in, you know, at the beginning of the unit. And this is how far I've come 1 month later. So we're celebrating the progress that the child has made. Because going back to that finished product, again, talk about killing the love of writing, especially I'm thinking on our little students, and that would have been me, the reluctant writer who didn't like writing. I would have gone sharpening my pencil the whole period. Finally finishing my first draft, it's doing good. I felt proud of myself. I worked a lot. And then the teacher is saying, oh, go and retype it, reprint it. Oh my goodness, like, no, not good. Killing the love of writing. So going back to what's your message, obviously depending on what's the celebration of it, but let's not spend too much time on that. Yes, you can. I'm looking at Juliana's comment. If we want to do it digitally, yes, especially now thinking of that virtual reality, you can definitely show it in Google Classroom or My Blueprint. You could definitely celebrate. What we want in that celebration piece is that there's an audience, is that the students are writing it for another class. What I love now in that virtual, you guys could ask your students to write a story, and the buddy reading of your class are going to be the audience. So the kid is going to share that story with their buddy reading, or it could be with grandma, grandpa, anyone who, especially because they can't see them now. So yes, you can definitely do it digitally.
Yeah, and I would see in My Blueprint, the students could even be holding their 2 pieces of writing or their final piece of writing and talking about how they've grown as a writer. So we're going to talk a little bit about supports that are in place to help with Writer's Workshop. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at what the online resources look like. So what we'll do is we'll send you some information. So going into September, whenever you can get your hands on the resources, is how to register them online. But I'm just going to quickly show you. Timeout. Awesome. Oh, I didn't. Okay. All of the things that are available. So you have your anchor chart is provided for you already. Some information, some units, information on the units, and then some guides, so talking about assessments. So here's where you'll get the assessment piece. But if we look at this, for example, session 1, here's everything you need. Session 2, here's everything you need. Session 3, here's everything you need. Here's all of the anchor charts, black and white, color, whatever you need. And then it'll tell you that you need this anchor chart for session 1. So everything that you could possibly need is in here. Another thing that we'll show you is the Teachers Reading and Writing Project is what this acronym is for. There's a Facebook group. And if you are in Facebook, we recommend that you definitely join, because there's some amazing questions and some amazing things being shared. Gwen is somebody that we're going to share with you tomorrow. She's been amazing with showing some mini lessons during COVID. But there'll be questions too. So somebody will just ask a question Or look at, if you're looking for something specifically, here's a really great resource. Here's our friend Jody Moore. But people will look or post questions like, I'm new to Writer's Workshop. I really don't understand blah. Does anybody have any recommendations for how to speed up my mini lesson? Does anybody have any ideas for ways that I can continue to work on small moments because my kids aren't getting it? So things like that. This is actually a really, really cool place to look at things that are going on. So we talked about the Heinemann website. Also, I would look at the Teachers Reading and Writing Project website. We have supports on our website. So in terms of, so if you look here, and we will send you all of these links. There's videos online here. This isn't exactly the right link, but anyways, we'll send you the link of like where all of their lessons are. So you can watch lessons of conferring, you can watch lessons of mini lessons. So there are tons of supports outside of us, as much as we want to always be your support people, but there's tons out there. So I know that a lot of people were looking for supports. I think sometimes even just leaning on other teachers is really important. We are out of time, and we would like to say thank you so much. If you do have some questions that you want to put into the chat, please do that now. If you want to stick around for a couple minutes, please do that as well. We can, if you do have the resources with you, we can help you get those online resources set up right now. So thank you so much for coming. We will see you tomorrow for talking about the mini lesson. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
So we're staying on if you have any questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You can stop the recording though, Julie.